Hello, I'm Fatima Romero, and my project is called Trial by Media. My presentation is about the influence of media coverage on high-profile criminal cases and how that impacts the fairness of our justice system. This topic focuses on how news outlets and social media shape public opinion, influence perceptions of guilt and innocence, and can sometimes affect the fairness of legal proceedings. It also looks at the balance between the public's right to information and a defendant's right to a fair trial, and whether media coverage supports the transparency or creates bias in our criminal justice system. The question I aim to answer is, how does media coverage influence public perception and the fairness of criminal trials? Media coverage of high-profile criminal cases can influence public perception by shaping narratives, creating bias, and placing pressure on legal officials, which may ultimately affect the fairness of the justice process. So what exactly is a high-profile criminal case? High-profile cases are cases that receive a large amount of public attention, usually because they involve serious crimes, well-known people, or unusual circumstances. These cases are often heavily covered by the media, which increases public interest and influence how people think about a case before a verdict has even been reached. To understand this issue, it's important to look at how media coverage has changed over time. With the rise of 24/7 news cycles and social media, information about criminal cases spreads much faster and reaches a much larger audience. This leads to something called pretrial publicity, which is media coverage that happens before a trial even begins. Pretrial publicity can contribute to jury bias because potential jurors may have already formed opinions about a case before hearing any type of evidence. This creates a legal challenge when balancing the First Amendment rights, which protect freedom of the press, and the Sixth Amendment right, which guarantees a fair trial. Heavy media coverage can make it more difficult to ensure jurors remain unbiased and that decisions are based only on evidence presented in court. So how can this cause problems? Media coverage plays a major role in shaping public perception. The way a case is reported can influence how people view the defendant and whether they believe someone is guilty or innocent, even without all the facts. Repeated exposure to certain narratives can shape public opinion and create strong assumptions about a case before it reaches the courtroom. This kind of coverage can lead to the pretrial publicity and therefore affect jury impartiality. When jurors are exposed to media coverage before a trial, they may carry those impressions into the courtroom, even if they're trying to remain fair. And this can make it difficult to ensure an unbiased jury and a fair trial process. A real-world example of this can be seen in the 2025 case United States v. Combs, where defense attorneys argue that widespread media coverage and public statements were undermining his right to a fair trial. They requested a gag order to limit further publicity, expressing concern that ongoing media attention could shape public opinion before the evidence was fully presented in court. In addition to the traditional news coverage, the release of the Netflix documentary added further attention and public discussion around the case. Even though the documentary was released after the trial had ended, it only continued to increase the amount of commentary and speculation surrounding the case. Regardless of whether he was guilty or innocent, this type of widespread media and entertainment coverage can be problematic, and it connects directly to the idea that media coverage shapes narratives and places pressure on legal officials. Social media has also increased the impact of media coverage on criminal cases by allowing information, opinions, and reactions to spread quickly and reach large audiences almost instantly. Unlike traditional news, social media gives the public the ability to actively comment, share, and debate ongoing cases. This often leads to what is known by trial by media, where public opinion is shaped so strongly by media coverage that individuals are judged before a legal verdict is reached. One major example of this was the Depp v. Heard case. During the case, platforms like TikTok, Instagram amplified public attention, with large fan communities forming strong opinions and taking sides. Hashtags such as the Justice for Johnny Depp gained a lot of views and support, showing how quickly narratives spread online. Social media users often simplified the case into a Team Johnny versus Team Amber debate, which reduced a very complex legal case into a public competition. This type of framing can encourage people to form strong emotional opinions, and it can lead to spread of misinformation or incomplete interpretations of a case, which just polarizes both sides. The pros, media attention does have pros and cons. On the positive side, media coverage increases transparency, it keeps the public informed, and can help hold our justice system accountable. It could also encourage public engagement with important legal issues and promote awareness on how our criminal justice system works. However, at the same time, media coverage can also create challenges when reporting becomes overly focused on speculation and sensational details. This can lead to a bias on how a case is viewed and place pressure on judges, attorneys, and jurors who may be aware of public opinion while making decisions. In high-profile cases, this attention can also make it more difficult to separate factual evidence from public narratives. Our courts have developed several responses to help manage the influences of media coverage in high-profile cases. One common approach is careful jury selection, where potential jurors are questioned to identify any existing biases or exposure to media coverage that could affect their ability to remain impartial. In some situations, this can include gag orders, which limit what attorneys, witnesses, or involved parties can say. It could also include restrict camera access in courtrooms or limited media access to prevent excessive publicity. These responses show that our legal system recognizes the impact of media coverage and attempts to protect fairness of trials by reducing the risk of outside influences on jurors and the judicial process. A common counter-argument is that the media does not actually influence legal outcomes and simply reflects what the public is already interested in. However, even if the media reflects public interest, it still plays a role in shaping how our information is presented and how people interpret a case. Because of this, media coverage can influence the public perception and create pressure around our system. In conclusion, media coverage has a major impact on high-profile criminal cases by shaping how the public views and reacts to them. It can increase transparency and awareness, but it can also create bias and raise concerns about fairness in trials. Overall, the media may not decide the outcome of a case, but it does strongly influences how people perceive them, which makes it a very, very important factor in our justice system. Thank you. References.